It turns out that wars are costly. Then again, you knew that already. But I do not just mean in the sense that lives are lost. Someone literally has to pay for everything, and Russia may be struggling with that right now. No worries for those of you listening from the Kremlin, though. Today's Geopolitics HelpLINE focuses on a golden solution to the problem. I saw a headline that Russia is selling off its gold reserves. If true, on a scale of business as usual to Putin is done, what are the implications? Sadly, this question did not come with a bribe of 2 bars of gold, but what can you do? Anyway, I am of 2 minds on this. 1, it represents a notable shift in Kremlin policy and cannot be shrugged off like I have seen in some commentary. But 2, it also does not mean that the Russian government is on the verge of a collapse. Thus, I would put this closer to the business as usual side of that scale, noting that it definitely is not business as usual. Now, we can make the headline seem dramatic if we want to. Russia sells record 44 tons of gold in 6 months to plug budget gap. Or, Russia taps gold reserves for $5.6 billion to fill deficit. Or, Russian gold reserves at their lowest levels since 2020. All of these are accurate headlines. However, by omission, they are misleadingly suggesting that Russia is in a worse position than it seems. A better approach is to put the sale in context of the reserves that Russia has on hand. Our best guess is 2,282 tons. Thus, if Russia sold 44 tons of gold over the first 6 months of 2026, it had depleted about 2% of its total reserves. I would therefore not describe this as panic selling. Call me in 2051 when they run out of gold at the current pace. Or don't, because I would prefer to be happily retired well before then. Another fallacy that I commonly see here is that this is worse than it seems, because it is happening concurrently with a budget crisis for the Kremlin. Now, the budget crisis part is true. This is what happens when you need to recruit 30,000 troops per month via market wage contracts and then equip them for battle. War funding does not grow on trees. The problem with this argument, though, is that it is double counting the Kremlin's issues. Russia is selling gold because there is a budget crisis. These are not separate points. That said, there are a few reasons for concern if you are working on these issues in the Kremlin. First, the sales may be accelerating. It was 44 tons of sales for the initial 6 months of the year, but 9.3 tons of that were from June alone. That compares to 6.2 tons from the previous 4 months. Note, though, it matched January's sales, so the trend is not constantly going the same way. It is just something to flag for later. Second, there is reason to be concerned about the Kremlin's finances in the near future. Russian air defenses have shown no ability to stop Ukraine's refinery attacks. A combination of Ukraine directly destroying those defenses and its defense companies accelerating production of MILF tech. If you know, you know. If you don't, please do not ask. Point is, we are a year into this campaign, and it is still somehow getting worse for Russia. Tax receipts on the sale of oil and refined products are a substitute for drawing down gold reserves. So if the strikes get worse, then the Kremlin will have to sell off more than 2% of the base quantity of gold per 6 months. On top of that, Ukraine has doubled down on the targets over the last month, now hitting Russia's largest online retailer, Wildberries. While those strikes are frustrating for the average Russian, the effects here will not be as pronounced for the Kremlin. The Russian state does not have a direct interest in those companies. Any economic damage will instead come from lost tax revenue, and it will be a while before we might observe any changes here. July's numbers do not get released until 3 weeks into August, and I doubt that the Kremlin will be making serious changes to its budgeting decisions until August itself, which means we will not know about the actual changes until September. And all of that, of course, assumes that the information that the Russian government releases is accurate. Now, before you discard that possibility entirely, the financial segments of the Russian government have been more reliable over the last 4 years. Still, there is a strong incentive to hide the extent of a massive sell-off, as it does indicate weakness. Just something to keep in the back of your mind. Meanwhile, a separate red flag here is that selling gold was not the Kremlin's first step to bridge the budget shortfall. Rather, it was at least the fourth. First was the drawdown from cash reserves in the Fortress Russia accounts, designed precisely to insulate Moscow from this type of situation. Recall that this could not last forever because Russia was silly and left a major chunk of it sitting in Western accounts, where it has been frozen ever since. Whoopsie. Second was selling bonds to any willing buyer. Unfortunately for Putin, these sales were mostly restricted to Russia's own banks, as sanctions removed Western buyers from the equation. Not that they would want to buy even if they could. This strategy had its limits because the Kremlin had to offer large interest rates to quell any uprisings from bank oligarchs. But then those interest rates made borrowing very expensive for private companies, further devaluing the future value of a ruble and creating a feedback loop. It did not help that the banks began to run out of liquidity to loan any rubles to the government. This led to option 3, which was to increase Russia's value-added tax. Aside from the Kremlin's mostly aborted attempt to mobilize troops to Ukraine in the fall of 2022, this was the first real way that the working class may have internalized the costs of the war. And even then, the Kremlin was balancing out citizen benefits. Remember, the average Russian worker has seen real wage increases thanks to the special military operation, the result of greater labor demand forcing companies to raise salaries. This was a way to suck some of that cash back to the war effort. And now we are at step 4, to sell off the gold. Thus, perhaps we should be looking less at the percentage of gold sold as the signal here, and more at how the Kremlin no longer feels that it can push on these easier solutions and still get what it needs without causing a political revolution. You can also see why the conversations about a new Russian mobilization next month seem plausible. Option 5 is to forget about raising new revenue streams and just force more unwilling Russian soldiers to ship out to the Donbass. And as one final note here, our entire analysis today has made the war out like it is a zero-sum game. It is not. It is negative-sum. Plot the lines in case you forgot. In other words, the right question to ask is not whether Russia can sustain its gold sales until 2051. Instead, it is to ask whether any of this is worth it. All of that money could be going to other, more productive things, like building an economic future for Russia. Say what you will about Saudi Arabia, but at least there, the government realized that its natural resource revenues will not last forever. Happily, you can use the cash as seed money for other business ventures that will be sustainable after the last oil well has run dry. I would not be optimistic about this point, though. To repeat my common refrain, this war is a vanity project for the Kremlin. Putin has put his stake down. He will be remembered alongside Peter the Great for expanding the Federation's borders into New Russia. The ship sailed on convincing him about opportunity costs a long time ago. Meanwhile, if you were about to click away, don't forget that your opportunity cost is the entire Geopolitics HelpLINE at your service. Click here to see what else we could discuss. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care.